to do the things you're asking them to do directly influences the learning process. So with competence, again, we're thinking athletic skills, physical skills, tactical skills, things like that, better athlete, right? And when we look at competence, to me, this gets to the root of coaching. Coaching is teaching. And I didn't come into coaching, especially having come from an athlete to being a coach, thinking like a teacher or thinking of coaching as teaching. But a few years back, I was being interviewed, and the person asked me, they said, well, you know what the word coach means, right? And I said, yeah, someone who coaches. I never really thought about it. I said, no, like the root of the word. What does that mean? Where did that word come from? And you could look this up. There's information about this online, but the word, one of the main origins of the word is from the tutors who traveled in these horse and buggies or these carriages, hundreds of years ago, teaching children while they were on these long journeys. Aristocrats, let's say, traveling across Europe with their kids in these carriages, and they would have a tutor. The tutor would be teaching the kids on these trips, and over time, these tutors simply became known as coaches because they traveled in the coach teaching the kids. And so I thought, okay, well, that's interesting to understand the root of the word. But then when we look at what we know about the science of great coaching, are great coaches really focused on teaching? Do they act like teachers? Do they understand pedagogy and teaching and learning and principles? And sure enough, they do. The better ones do. They invest heavily in learning how to become a better teacher. So it's not enough to know basketball or cricket. You have to know how to teach it. That's what your job is as a coach, your primary job. And the very first study, so one of the things I did early in my career was try and get a sense of what do we already know. And Coach Wooden also famously once said, the problem with new books is it keeps us from reading old books. Chances are the information's out there if you want to go look for it. So I looked at all the research that was published in English language research in coaching to see what do we really know about this thing called coaching. And all of it could be traced back to one study that was done, arguably the very first study ever on coaching science, in 1974, published in 1976, a study on John Wooden, the basketball coach. And it was the last year of his career, and it was also the year that resulted in the 10th championship that he won with his team. And so it was the last chance to study him. And what they did is they just went to the practices in the gyms in Los Angeles, and they just watched him. They never talked to him. There's two psychologists, and they just watched him. And I've been kept very close with one of these psychologists. He's still alive today. And they just watched him, and they just did a behavior analysis. What does this great coach do in training? What does he look like? And they published it in a magazine, a 2-page article in Psychology Today. You could still look it up. And it was just, this was the results section. It was just a table. And I highlighted here at the top the primary finding. So imagine if someone watched you for an entire season and practices and coded or recorded everything you said and did. And with John Wooden, as our very first coaching study and arguably one of the best coaches of all time, over 50% of everything he said or did was directly related to teaching, was instruction. But then if you factor in modeling and re-instruction, now we're getting up over 60%. So when you look at a portrait of one of our great coaches of all time, it clearly shows he was first and foremost a teacher, and he acted and thought like a teacher. And there's other studies with him explaining why he did it that way. And so when I was asked to write a book about coaching a few years back, I wanted to make sure I had a chapter in that book on teaching and learning. And I took 3 years to write the book, and I tried to go as deep as I could to for myself to better understand teaching and learning. And everything that after reading as much as I could, I compiled all the evidence into these 4 principles. So as a coach, if I want to be a better teacher, if I use these 4 principles, I will put myself in a position to be a more effective teacher, which will help obviously become more efficient in building your athlete's confidence. So number 1, I'll just go through these quickly here, but number 1, prior knowledge can help or hinder athlete learning. So we should meet athletes where they are. We can come in with a practice plan and drills, but our first step should be kind of a needs assessment. When I meet with my team, let's do some skills tests. Let's see what we got. Let's see what their dribbling skills are like or their catching skills are like. So let's take that first practice and just see where they are. And then I can make a better determination of where to meet them, where to start. Oh, I thought they could already do that. I guess I got to back up. Or, wow, they're actually more advanced than I thought. We could probably skip those 3 things I was going to do first. And that then relates to the second principle, is motivation. So their motivation to do the things you're asking them to do directly influences the learning process. That we can't assume that they're going to do things just because I'm the coach and I'm telling them to do it. I need to, again, meet them where they are, help them understand why we're doing things and how they relate to what they want to do. Because again, it's about them. It's not about me. Third principle, skill mastery requires athletes to learn component skills. So think of competence like a puzzle. Any skill, tactic, technique that you're trying to teach someone is like a puzzle. And anytime you think of a puzzle, when you get a puzzle, the first thing you do is you look at the cover of the box, you look at the picture, so you get a picture of what the final product should look like. You empty all the pieces on the table, and then you start organizing the pieces, right? You organize them by color or maybe by edges or corners, and you move them around the table into piles. It's the same thing with teaching skills. There's always pieces of a skill that they need to be able to do before they can do the next skill. So as a coach, have I really thought about, like, if I want my team to be better at scoring, let's say, right, in an invasion team, what are the components of being able to score? They have to be able to pass. They have to be able to read the play. They have to be in position. They have to be fit enough to get where they need to be to receive a pass. There's a lot of pieces. So it's not just scoring. Well, what are the pieces of putting them in a position to know how to do that? And then the last one is deliberate practice and specific feedback. So all practice is not equal. Deliberate practice is practicing things you're not good at. And if you didn't show up, or you just let athletes decide, okay, we're going to practice what you want to do tonight. So what activities or drills do you want to do? Any age, any sport, any level, guarantee you they're going to pick the things they can already do, because it's much more intrinsically motivating and rewarding to practice things I'm already good at. Nobody's going to say, I want to practice that thing I can't do yet because it's really hard and I always fail. I mean, you'll get a couple of kids maybe that want it, and that's great. But so the deliberate practice is pushing them to practice the stuff that's hard for them, things they can't yet do. And that's where feedback is really important, so that you can keep them on track and motivated to keep going. So I always encourage you to think about, what are the things that they're struggling with? How can we make sure there's time in practice to focus on that, maybe early in practice? And then what type of feedback do I want to have ready to give them when they're doing that? So what kind of words do I want to use? What statements do I want to use, instead of just reacting and whatever you happen to think of in the moment?